I still remember the moment like it is happening right now. The hall was full of warm lights. Soft music was playing. People were smiling, clapping, taking pictures, and celebrating my son's wedding. Everyone looked so happy. Everyone looked like they belonged there. Except me. I was sitting alone at the corner table, holding a small glass of water in my shaking hands. I had dressed as nicely as I could. I had even borrowed a shawl from my neighbor because I wanted to look respectable, at least for this one day. But in that big, bright wedding hall, I felt smaller than I had ever felt. I kept telling myself, it is my son's big day. Do not cry. Do not make anyone uncomfortable. Just sit quietly. Just smile. But my smile refused to stay on my face. It had already been 3 years since I moved out of my son's house. 3 years since the day my daughter-in-law told me, very softly but very clearly, that the house was too small for everyone. I had only nodded. I did not argue. I did not ask why suddenly the house had become small. I just packed my few clothes and left. And now here I was, invited to the wedding only because my son had insisted at the last moment. Even then, no one came to sit with me. People walked past me like I was a decoration kept in the wrong place. Some smiled politely. Most did not even look. I kept my head down, trying not to take up too much space, as if I could make myself invisible and still be present at my son's happiness. That was when I felt a tiny hand touch my shoulder. It was my grandson, the only person in this world who still looked at me with pure love. He leaned close to my ear, trying to hide his smile. "Doddy," he whispered, "look under the table." I thought he was playing a game, trying to make me laugh like the old days when we used to make little paper boats and race them in the rainwater outside the house. But when I slowly bent forward and looked under the tablecloth, I froze. There, taped carefully to the underside of the table, was something that made my breath stop. Something he wanted me to see. Something he wanted me to understand. Something that changed everything about that day. And for a long moment, the sounds of the wedding faded away. Everything around me blurred. All I could hear was my heartbeat. I lifted my head, looked at my grandson, and he gave me the softest smile, the kind that holds secrets and pain together. "Doddy," he said again, "I put it there for you, so you do not feel alone." At that moment, the wedding hall felt colder than winter. And for the first time that day, a tear finally escaped my eye. But this story, this moment, did not begin at the wedding. It began years before. In my small home, in the kitchen where I cooked for everyone, in the evenings when we all sat together like a real family, and in the slow breaking of my heart that no one noticed except that little boy. To understand why that message under the table mattered so much, you must know what happened before the wedding. How I ended up sitting alone. And how a child, my sweet grandson, saw what no adult cared to see. I was not always this lonely. There was a time when my home was full of voices, footsteps, laughter, and arguments. A time when I used to wake up before sunrise and start my day with tea boiling on the stove, bread warming on the tawa, and my heart filled with a kind of simple peace. My son, Samir, was always the quiet one. As a little boy, he would sit near me while I cooked, asking questions about everything. "Ami, why does the steam go up? Ami, why do birds not get tired of flying? Ami, why do you never rest?" I would laugh and touch his hair gently. "I will rest when you grow up and take care of me," I used to say. And he always replied, "I will, Ami. I promise." Promises made by children are soft like flowers, beautiful when they bloom, painful when they fall. When Samir grew older, he found a job in a small company. The salary was not big, but he worked hard. I felt proud of him every day. When he wanted to get married, I supported him. I prayed for his happiness. His wife, Amina, was young and polite when she first came home. She spoke softly. She helped me in the kitchen. She called me Ami with sweetness in her voice. In the early months, I truly believed we would become a close family. I thought we would cook together, laugh together, take care of each other. And for a while, it felt that way. But slowly things changed. Small things at first. Amina stopped helping me in the kitchen. She started waking up late. She complained that the house was too small, that her friends lived in nicer places, that she wanted more comfort, more privacy, more independence. I understood. She was young. She deserved comfort. I never wanted to be a burden. But what she did next, I did not expect. One day she told my son, "We should move to a separate house. It is better for everyone." I heard them whispering in their room, but I pretended I did not. Mothers do that sometimes. We pretend not to hear things that hurt us. But my son said no. He told her, "I promised my mother I would take care of her." I heard that too. And I cried quietly into my pillow that night because hearing your child defend you is one of the most painful forms of love. For a while, the house returned to normal. But normal does not last forever. A year later, my grandson was born. Amina became busy with him. She stopped talking to me much. She became irritated easily, stressed from being a new mother. I tried to help. I woke up in the night to hold the baby. I cooked for her. I cleaned the house so she could rest. But sometimes, when someone already feels burdened, even your help feels like a burden to them. She began to say things like, "Your way is old. Let me do it my way." Or, "You do not understand modern parenting." I stayed quiet, even when her words stung. But my grandson, he loved me with a pure, innocent love. He would crawl towards me, tug at my clothes, and climb into my lap. We would sit near the window where the sunlight was soft, and he would press his tiny head against my chest. In those moments I felt seen. I felt needed. I felt alive. And that was enough for me. Years passed. Things in the house kept changing. Some days were peaceful, some days were heavy. There were small arguments, small silences, small hurts. But I held on. Because that is what mothers do. We hold on even when our fingers start slipping. I never thought one day Amina would tell me to leave. I never thought my son would let her words win. But sometimes life changes in one moment, like a candle blown out by a sudden wind. That moment came quietly. No shouting. No drama. Just a sentence spoken too softly to be called cruelty, but heavy enough to break an old woman's heart. It was evening. The kitchen smelled of rice and lentils. My grandson was doing his homework at the table. My son was still at work. Amina stood near the sink, not looking at me. Her voice was calm when she spoke. "Ami, I think you should start living somewhere else." For a second, I thought I misheard her. But her eyes were clear, and her tone was firm. "The house is too small now," she continued. "We need space. You will be happier somewhere quiet." Somewhere quiet. A polite way of saying, somewhere else. My grandson looked up at me, confused. "Doddy, where will you go?" I smiled at him. The kind of smile you give a child when your heart is breaking but you do not want them to carry the weight of your sadness. "I am not going far," I said softly. "I will always be near." He believed me. Children always believe the people they love. That night, I packed my things. I folded my clothes one by one. I wrapped my old shawl carefully. I placed a small framed photo of my son next to my prayer mat. I waited for my son to come home, hoping he would stop me, hoping he would say, "Ami, you are not going anywhere." He did not. He stood there, silent, helpless, torn between me and his wife. I touched his arm gently. "It is all right," I whispered. "You did not break my heart. Life did." He lowered his head. I walked out of the house slowly, making sure my steps did not echo too loudly. My grandson ran to the door, tears filling his eyes. He hugged me tight. "Doddy, do not go." "I will visit," I said. "I promise." Promises made by adults are heavy, sometimes too heavy to carry. I went to live in a small rented room on the other side of the town. It was not much, but it was mine. I kept myself busy with small chores, simple days, and long nights. My grandson visited whenever he could. Sometimes with my son. Sometimes alone when he grew older. He always brought me small gifts, a drawing, a flower, a note. He understood my loneliness more than anyone else. And that is how life went on. Until the day my son remarried. Until the day I sat alone at the wedding, holding a glass of water with shaking hands. Until the moment my grandson whispered, "Doddy, look under the table." Life has a way of moving forward even when our hearts stay behind. My days in the small rented room slowly turned into weeks, and then months. I learned to live with silence. I learned to make peace with loneliness. And I learned to pretend that everything was all right, even when I knew it was not. But the truth is, it hurt. It hurt every day. Some mornings, I woke up expecting to hear my grandson's footsteps running across the house. Sometimes, while cooking, I would turn around expecting to see my son sitting on the kitchen stool, talking to me about his day. But there was only silence. Still, I forced myself to stay steady. I reminded myself that mothers are made for sacrifice. Our hearts bend but do not break, at least not in ways others can see. My son visited me occasionally. He brought groceries, some medicine, sometimes a little money. He tried to smile. He tried to act normal. But a mother's eyes can see through any smile. He was not happy. Something was troubling him. Something he did not say, something he did not want me to know. One evening, as we sat in my small room drinking tea, he looked around with a strange sadness in his eyes. "Ami, you deserve better than this," he said quietly. I smiled, trying to ease his guilt. "I have everything I need," I replied. And I meant it too, because even though my room was small, at least I had peace. At least I had space where no one sighed or frowned at my presence. He nodded but did not speak again. There was a heaviness in him, a heaviness I recognized all too well. It was the same heaviness he carried on the day I left his house. Before he left, he hugged me. It was a long hug, the kind a child gives when he is lost but does not want to admit it. And then he said something strange. "Ami, thank you for understanding. Thank you for never making things harder." I did not understand his words fully then, but later I would. After I moved out, Amina visited me only once. She came with my grandson, stood at the door, and handed me a small box of sweets. She did not come inside. "Just came to check if you are fine," she said slowly. "I am fine," I replied. She nodded, and then she turned to leave. Her face was tired, her eyes restless. I wondered if she regretted asking me to leave. I wondered if she even remembered that day. I wanted to ask her, was I really such a burden? But the words stayed locked inside my heart. I did not want to reopen wounds. I did not want to cause more trouble between her and my son. So I stayed quiet. But my grandson did not stay quiet. Every time he visited, he asked me the same question. Doddy, why do you live alone? Why can't you come home? I never had the courage to tell him the truth. Children deserve love, not bitterness. So I always answered gently, I am close by. And you visit me. That is enough. He never believed me. His eyes always searched for the truth I could not speak. Almost 2 years passed like this. Quiet days. Short visits. Long silences. My son began to visit less often. He called sometimes, but even on the phone, his voice sounded far away, tired, distracted. One day, while he was sitting on the chair near my window, I finally asked, Samir, is everything all right? He hesitated. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. Then he whispered, Ami, things are not good at home. Something pressed hard against my chest. What happened? I asked calmly. He didn't look at me. He stared at the floor. Amina and we argue a lot now. She is not happy. I felt a sting of guilt, even though I had done nothing wrong. He continued, she thinks I care more about other people than I care about her. I understood the hidden meaning. He meant me. He always meant me. I wanted to hold his hand and tell him that he was not wrong for loving his mother. But I also knew that marriages are fragile, and I did not want to be the reason for his pain. So I placed my hand on his shoulder and said softly, Samir, take care of your home first. Your mother will always be here. Do what you think is right. He nodded, but his eyes were full of sadness. That was one of the last long conversations we had. After that, he slowly drifted away, like a boat untied from the shore, carried by currents no one can control. One afternoon, my grandson came running into my room, breathless and excited. He had grown taller, and his school uniform was too short at the sleeves. Doddy! Doddy! He shouted before stopping to take a breath. I held his face gently. What happened, Beta? Why are you running like this? He sat on the floor, crossed his legs, and looked up at me with wide, serious eyes. Doddy, Baba and Mama, they fight a lot now. My heart trembled. I had feared this. How do you know? I asked gently. He pointed toward his ear. I hear them, he whispered. Sometimes at night. I wanted to tell him that everything would be fine. I wanted to protect him from the pain of adults. But I could not lie to him. So I held him close, and he rested his small head on my lap. I am scared for Baba, he whispered. You love him very much, I said. Yes, he replied. And I love you too. But they do not like when I talk about you. His voice broke a little. In that moment, I realized something I had ignored for a long time. I had not been thrown out of my house because there was no space. I had been thrown out because my presence was uncomfortable for someone who wanted full control. Amina wanted a life where she did not have to share her husband or her home. And now, even my grandson felt unsafe speaking my name. Children see things adults try to hide. They feel the cracks in the walls long before they break. A few months later, my son came to see me. His face was pale. His eyes looked empty. Ami, I need to tell you something. I knew before he even said it. I could feel the truth sitting heavily in the room. Amina and I are separating. My breath caught. I closed my eyes for a moment. He continued. She left. She took her things. And she left. She said she cannot live this life anymore. He said it calmly, but his voice was trembling underneath. I stood up slowly and placed my hand on his back. I am here, I whispered. That was all I could offer. Presence. Not solutions. Not advice. Just presence. He cried quietly, like a grown man who had held his pain too long. He cried into the same hands that had held him as a child. After a long silence, he said, I failed, Ami. As a husband. And as a son. I shook my head. No. Beta. Sometimes things fall apart even when we do everything right. But deep inside, I wondered, did my leaving make things better or worse? Was my absence supposed to bring peace, but instead, it brought emptiness? I did not know. Life does not give mothers clear answers. Months passed. My son slowly started healing. He grew closer to my grandson, giving him the love he had missed in those tense years. They would visit me more often now, sometimes together, sometimes separately. My small room felt alive again with their laughter. But fate had another twist. One evening, my son sat down and said shyly, Ami, I am thinking about remarrying. I looked at him for a long moment. His face had hope again. His eyes had light again. Do you love her? I asked gently. He nodded. She is kind, Ami. She understands me. She knows everything about my past. And she wants to be part of our lives. Our lives. He said it in a way that included me. That alone made my heart soften toward the woman I had not even met yet. I smiled. If she makes your heart peaceful, then she is the right person. He took my hands in his. Will you come to the wedding, Ami? It will make me happy. I nodded. Of course. A mother never misses her child's happiness. He smiled with relief. But I did not know then that even at that wedding, I would again sit alone. Not because of his new wife, but because of the shadows of the past still following us. And I did not know that under one of those wedding tables, my grandson would hide something for me. Something small, simple, yet powerful enough to break my heart open again. The night before the wedding, my grandson came to see me. He sat on my bed, his feet dangling. Doddy, he whispered, I made something for you. What is it? I asked. He looked around as if someone might overhear. It is a surprise. You will see it tomorrow. But promise me you will look under the table where you sit. I laughed softly. What are you planning? He shook his head. You will understand tomorrow. I hugged him close, feeling the warmth of his small body. His love was the only thing that reminded me I still belonged somewhere. He then said something that stayed with me. Doddy, Bobber is happy again. But sometimes I think he is still sad inside. I can see it in his eyes. Children always see the truth. Even in silence. I placed my hand on his cheek. He will heal, I whispered. And so will we. He nodded and rested his head on my shoulder. Those few minutes, those simple, quiet minutes, were more precious to me than the grand wedding that would follow. The next day, I dressed carefully. I wore my best clothes. I brushed my hair slowly. I looked at myself in the mirror and told myself, smile, even if it hurts. Today is his day. I arrived early at the hall. People greeted me politely but moved on quickly. I took a seat in the corner, not too close, not too far. I watched the decorations, the soft lights, the flowers, the people enjoying the celebration. Then I saw my grandson running toward me. His face was glowing with excitement. "Doddy," he whispered, "sit here. This table. Remember, okay?" I nodded. He squeezed my hand. "You will not forget to look under the table?" I smiled. "How can I forget? You told me so many times." He grinned and ran off again. And that brings us back to the moment where part 1 ended. When he came back, leaned close to my ear, and whispered, "Doddy, look under the table." What I found there was not just a message. It was a truth about my son. A truth about our family. A truth my grandson had carried alone. And it changed everything. I remember bending forward slowly, afraid the tablecloth might fall off or draw attention. My hands trembled a little. The laughter and music around me felt distant, like they were happening in another world. When I lifted the tablecloth and looked underneath, my breath caught in my throat. There, taped neatly to the bottom of the wooden table, was a piece of folded paper. A simple white paper. But the handwriting on it. I knew it right away. It was my son's handwriting. My heart began to beat harder. My fingers shook as I reached for the note. It felt warm, as if someone had held it tightly before placing it there. When I opened it, I saw only one sentence written in my son's tired, familiar writing. "I am sorry, Amy." Just those 3 words. Nothing more. But those 3 words were enough to break open every hidden wound inside me. I sat there frozen, staring at the sentence again and again. The hall around me disappeared. The lights blurred. The music faded. All I could see were those words. "I am sorry, Amy." A soft gasp escaped my lips. My eyes filled instantly, but I kept blinking, scared the tears might fall and attract attention. Then I heard a whisper beside me. "Doddy, do you know what it means?" I turned to look at my grandson. His small face was full of sadness, the kind of sadness a child should never carry. "How did you get this?" I asked gently. He looked at his hands. "I found it in Boba's drawer, the day Mama left." My heart squeezed painfully. He continued, his voice soft and trembling. "He wrote it but never gave it to you. He kept it hidden. I think he was too scared." I lowered my head. The hall around us felt colder now. "He cried that day, Doddy," my grandson whispered. "I saw him. He was sitting on the floor, holding this paper. He kept reading it again and again." I closed my eyes. He kept saying, "It was my fault. I should have stopped her. I should not have let Amy leave." My chest felt tight. My breathing grew heavy. My grandson touched my arm softly. "I saved the note," he said. "I thought, one day you should know." A tear slipped down my cheek. I wanted to speak, but my voice was trapped somewhere deep inside my throat. For years, I believed my son had accepted me leaving. I believed he had chosen silence. I believed he had chosen his wife over me. But now, this note, this tiny sentence, was telling me something else. He had never stopped loving me. He had never stopped hurting. He had never stopped blaming himself. My grandson kept speaking, his voice gentle, thoughtful. "Boba still talks about you, Doddy. But he does not say it loudly. He says it in the way people say things when their heart is scared." I looked at him through blurry eyes. He would look at your picture and say, "She deserved better." He would pick up the phone many times, but he would not call. I saw him, Doddy. A quiet, heavy silence filled me. The weight of that note. The weight of his guilt. The weight of our unspoken love. It sat on my chest like a stone. I folded the note carefully, pressing it against my heart. At that moment, I felt something inside me change, something deep, something old. For years I had carried a quiet grief, believing that my absence did not matter to him. But now I knew. He had suffered too. He had cried too. He had carried the guilt silently, just like I carried the hurt. And this truth, this small piece of paper, changed everything. As I held the note, memories flashed before my eyes. My son as a child, running barefoot across the courtyard. His small hands gripping my scarf so I wouldn't leave the room. His excited voice telling me about school projects, new friends, and childhood dreams. His promise, I will take care of you, Amy. Always. But somewhere along the way, life had stolen his certainty. Marriage, responsibilities, pressure, emotional storms, they all changed him, shaped him, weakened him. He didn't stop loving me. He just didn't know how to fight for me. And I didn't know how to stay without becoming a burden. Two hearts filled with love. Two people hurting quietly. Two souls too scared to speak the truth to each other. That is what families often become. Not broken, but full of unsaid words. My grandson sat closer to me. Doddy, do you think Baba will be angry that I showed you this? I took his little hands into mine. No, beta, I whispered. He will be relieved. He looked confused. But he never gave it to you. Because he was scared, I said softly. Not because he didn't love me. He exhaled slowly as if understanding something deeper. He still has that fear, my grandson whispered. He thinks you blame him. I wanted to cry again. Blame him? I had never blamed him. I blamed fate. I blamed misunderstandings. I blamed time. But not him. Never him. I brushed away a tear from his cheek. I didn't even realize he had started crying too. Children carry more than we think. Why did you put it under the table? I asked him gently. He looked down at his small shoes. Because I wanted you to know the truth before the wedding became too loud, he said quietly. I wanted you to know. You were never unwanted, Doddy. My throat tightened. You were never the problem, he whispered. The hall suddenly felt too bright, too noisy, too full of people who had no idea that at one small table, 3 generations of pain were being held inside one little note. I placed my hand on his head, smoothing his hair. You are brave, I whispered. You are the only one who had the courage to show me what no one else could. He leaned against me. I love you, Doddy. I hugged him gently. I love you too, my child. As I sat there holding the note, I realized something that hurt more deeply than any words spoken in anger. My son didn't push me out. He didn't want me to leave. He simply didn't know how to stand firm against the storm his marriage had become. He was a gentle man, too gentle to fight loud battles. His silence had been mistaken for agreement. And that silence had cost all of us years of pain. Tears began to fall down my cheeks again. Not loud, not dramatic, just soft, quiet tears. Tears of understanding. Tears of regret. Tears of forgiveness. Because I had misunderstood too. I had thought he chose his wife over me. But he had been trapped in a situation where every choice hurt someone he loved. And in the end, he chose silence. Because silence felt safer than breaking apart the family he was trying so hard to hold together. While I was lost in these thoughts, I looked up and saw my son standing across the hall. He was talking to someone, smiling politely, but his eyes looked tired. For a moment, our eyes met. He paused. His smile faded. His breath caught slightly, just enough for me to notice. He looked at me like he wanted to walk toward me, like he wanted to say something, like he wanted to bridge years of distance. But then someone tapped his shoulder, pulling him back into conversation, and he turned away. I watched him quietly. He didn't know about the note. He didn't know what his son had done. He didn't know that the truth he had hidden in his drawer was now in my hands, pressed against my heart. He didn't know that today. Something inside me had shifted. As the wedding went on, my grandson whispered suddenly, "Doddy, will you forgive Baba?" The question hit me like a wave. Forgive him? Of course. Mothers forgive their children long before the children even realize they need forgiveness. But this was deeper. This was about healing the wounds of years. This was about letting go of the loneliness, the hurt, and the silence. I answered softly. I forgave him the day I walked out of the house. My grandson nodded slowly. He needs to hear it, he whispered. And at that moment I knew. This wedding was not just the beginning of my son's new life. It was also the moment when I could give him freedom from a guilt he had carried silently for years. A guilt only a mother could release him from. I looked at the note again. I am sorry, Ami. No mother wants to hear her son apologize for trying to live. No mother wants her child to carry the weight of her sadness. And I realized. Tonight, I had to speak to him. Not as a mother who had suffered. Not as a woman who had been hurt. But as a mother who understood. As a mother who loved him too much to let him carry guilt into his new marriage. I folded the note again and slipped it into my handbag. My hands no longer trembled. My heart no longer felt heavy. Instead, I felt a strange peace. Like someone had opened a window inside me, letting fresh air come in. My grandson smiled gently, sensing my calmness. Doddy, you feel better now? Yes, I whispered. Because now I know the truth. He leaned closer. Will you talk to Baba tonight? I nodded. Yes. For both of us. Something that left me breathless. Something that changed the entire night. Something that pushed my emotions into a place I had not been in years. I saw someone walking toward me. Someone I never expected to see here. And the story took a turn I did not see coming. I stayed sitting on that wooden bench for a long time. The hall was noisy, full of laughter and celebration, but around me everything felt quiet. It was as if my heart had stepped out of the room and was standing somewhere else, watching me from a distance. I kept wiping my eyes even though no new tears were falling. It was just an old habit. When something hurt too much, I tried to keep my face clean, as if that would make the pain smaller. After a while, a waiter walked past me. He was a young boy, maybe 17 or 18, and he looked at me for a moment as if he could sense something. He asked softly if I needed water. His voice was gentle. I smiled and nodded. He brought a glass and placed it beside me. When he left, I whispered a thank you even though he was already far away. Sometimes the smallest kindness feels like a light in a dark room. I heard the music changing inside. It was louder now, the kind of music people play when the dancing begins. I could imagine everyone smiling, clapping, taking videos. I tried to picture my son on the stage, lifting his bride's hand, showing her to the world with pride. I wondered if he was thinking of me. I wondered if he noticed I was missing. But a small part inside me already knew the answer. He was busy with his new life. Maybe that was how it was supposed to be. Still, a mother's hope does not die easily. It stays even when the world gives her 100 reasons to let it go. After some time, I stood up again. My legs were stiff. My back ached a little. But I walked slowly toward the hall entrance. I stopped right before entering and looked inside. The lights were bright. The people were happy. My son was indeed on the stage, his arm around his bride, both of them smiling for the camera. He looked handsome and calm. He looked complete. For a moment, I felt proud. A small, pure feeling that rose above everything else. I whispered to myself, "He looks happy. That is enough." I was about to step inside when I heard a familiar voice. It was my grandson again. His little feet ran toward me, and his small hands grabbed the edge of my shawl. He tugged it gently, like he used to do when he wanted to show me his drawings. He said, "Grandma, I found something else. Come with me." I looked at him carefully. His eyes were still bright, still innocent, still full of trust. He didn't know what was happening around him, and maybe that was a blessing. To him, I was still his grandma. Nothing had changed. I followed him, my steps slow but steady. He led me to a side corridor where it was quieter. He pointed toward a small corner near a decorative flower stand. "Look," he said, his voice filled with excitement. I bent down, expecting to see another note or maybe a flower he thought was special. But this time there was nothing. Just a bit of glitter on the carpet. He looked disappointed for a moment, as if he had expected something magical to appear. I smiled and touched his cheek. "It's okay, Beta," I said. "Maybe you saw something only you could see." He smiled back. Then he leaned his head against my leg for a second, as children do when they want a little comfort without asking. I placed my hand on his hair. His small presence felt like a warm blanket around my heart. But then, his mother called him from far behind us. Her voice echoed down the corridor, sharp and urgent. "Come back. Dinner is starting. And stay with your father." He pulled away from me and ran toward her. But he looked back once, and waved. Just a small wave. Soft and innocent. I waved back. That tiny moment felt like a thread keeping me connected to this place, to this family, to a part of my life that seemed to be slipping away. I watched them walk together. She placed her hand on his shoulder. She didn't look at me. Not even once. I stayed in the corridor for a few minutes. The walls were covered with photographs of the bride and groom. Beautiful pictures. Perfectly edited. Perfect poses. They looked like a fairy tale couple. I wondered if anyone in this hall would ever put a picture of me on their wall. Probably not. The thought stung a little, but I tried to release it with a long, slow breath. Then I walked back to the bench and sat down again. I told myself I would wait until dinner was over. Then I would congratulate my son quietly and leave. I didn't want to make anything uncomfortable. I didn't want to force myself where I was not wanted. I had lived long enough to know that love cannot survive where it is not welcomed. As I sat there, I remembered the time my son was small. I remembered giving him a bath, wrapping him in a towel, and holding him close as he giggled into my neck. I remembered cooking his favorite meals, stitching his school uniform buttons when they fell off, cutting his nails, checking his homework, staying awake when he had a fever, praying for him every night. I remembered his first day of school, when he held my hand so tightly because he was scared. I remembered the day he cried when I left him with a teacher he didn't know. I remembered everything. And now, all these years later, he didn't even notice that I was sitting outside his wedding hall, alone, wiping my eyes so quietly that no one would hear. Life moves fast. Children grow fast. And sometimes, love fades quietly, without any sound. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the memories settle inside me like dust on old furniture. Soft. Silent. Always there. When I opened my eyes, the waiter passed by again. This time he asked, "Madam, would you like to sit inside? There is a seat near the wall." I smiled and shook my head. "No, thank you. I am fine here." He hesitated, as if he wanted to say something else. But then he nodded and walked away. I looked toward the entrance again. Lights flashed from inside. Someone announced that the couple was about to take family photos. For a brief moment, hope rose in my heart. Maybe they would call me. Maybe someone would remember I existed. So I waited. And waited. But no one came. I lowered my head and whispered to myself, maybe today is not about me. I tried to swallow the ache, but it sat in my chest like a stone. Still, inside that heavy silence, there was something gentle too. A small voice in my heart telling me to stay calm, to breathe, to let things be what they are. And that is what I did. I must have been sitting on that bench for almost an hour when the noise inside began to soften. Maybe the music had slowed down. Maybe people were settling into their seats for dinner. Or maybe it was just my own heart growing quiet after all its crying. I kept my hands folded in my lap and tried to keep my breathing steady. When life becomes too heavy, sometimes all we can control is one breath at a time. A small group of women walked past me toward the exit. They were dressed beautifully, laughing softly. One of them looked at me for a moment with a confused expression, as if she was trying to guess who I was. But she did not stop. They all disappeared into the parking area, their jewelry shining in the corridor lights. I wondered how many people inside even knew that the groom's mother was sitting alone outside. When I was younger, I used to think a wedding was a place where the whole family came together, where every heart beat in the same happiness. But tonight taught me that sometimes a wedding can also be an empty place, where someone silently loses everything while others celebrate. I leaned back against the wall and closed my eyes again. For a moment, I imagined someone coming out and holding my hand. I imagined my son saying, "Ami, come inside. Sit with us." I imagined laughter, warmth, belonging. But when I opened my eyes, the bench was still empty beside me, and the corridor was still quiet. A little later, my grandson appeared again. This time he wasn't running. He walked slowly toward me, almost like he didn't want anyone to notice. When he reached me, he sat beside me without saying a word. His legs dangled off the edge of the bench, swinging softly back and forth. I turned to look at him. "Are you okay?" I asked. He nodded. Then he took my hand and held it between both of his small hands. His palms were warm. I felt a sudden sting in my eyes again, but I blinked it away. I didn't want him to see me sad. For a while, we sat together in silence. It felt like the most honest moment of the whole night. Then he whispered, "Grandma, why are you sitting here alone?" His question was soft, innocent, and it pierced straight through me. I opened my mouth to answer, but for a moment no words came. How could I explain something so heavy to a child so small? How could I tell him that adults sometimes hurt each other without meaning to, that hearts sometimes close for reasons even they don't understand? So instead, I gave him a simple answer. "I am just resting," I said. "Sometimes grandmas get tired." He looked at me with those big, deep eyes that always found truth even when no one spoke it. "But I don't want you to be alone." I felt my throat tighten. "I am not alone," I whispered. "You are here." He smiled a little. Then he leaned his head on my arm. I brushed his hair gently with my fingers. His presence made the cold night feel warmer. After a few minutes, someone called his name again. His mother. Her voice was sharper this time. He straightened up and looked at me. "I have to go," he said softly. I nodded. "Go, Beta. Enjoy the wedding." He stood up, but before leaving, he placed something in my hand. It was a small paper heart he had folded. The edges were uneven, the shape was imperfect, but it was made with his tiny fingers, filled with his innocent love. He whispered, "I made it for you." I closed my hand around it. "Thank you," I said, my voice nearly trembling. He smiled and ran off. I watched him disappear down the corridor again. I opened my hand and looked at the paper heart. It was slightly crushed, but I pressed it gently to smooth it. As I looked at it, something in my chest softened. For all the pain around me, this small gift felt like a reminder that love still existed. Maybe not from everyone, but enough from someone who mattered to me. When I stood up again, I walked toward the entrance of the hall. I didn't go inside. I just stood at the doorway, watching from a distance. I could see people lined up for the dinner buffet. My son and his bride were surrounded by relatives taking photos. Everyone looked busy, happy, satisfied. I watched my son laughing with his friends. His laughter was loud and bright. I used to love that sound. I used to love knowing I was the one who first taught him how to laugh. I used to be the person he ran to when he was scared or hurt. I used to be the safe place for him. But now I felt like a shadow standing outside a world that no longer belonged to me. Still, I whispered a small prayer under my breath. May he always stay happy. May his home be full of peace. May he never know the loneliness I feel right now. After some time, I stepped back again and returned to the bench. I placed the paper heart in my handbag carefully, as if it was made of glass. I knew I would keep it forever. A few minutes later, a middle-aged woman came out of the hall. Her hands were full of gift bags. She stopped near me and gave me a polite smile, but her eyes were curious. "Whose side are you from?" she asked kindly. I opened my mouth, but for a moment I didn't know what to say. I forced a small smile and replied, "The groom's." She frowned slightly. "Oh, are you a relative?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, I am his mother." Her expression changed immediately. Shock. Then awkwardness. Then a little embarrassment. She quickly adjusted her shawl and said, "Oh, I didn't see you inside." "It's okay," I said. "I was just outside for a while." She nodded quickly, trying to hide her confusion. "Well, may Allah bless the couple." Then she hurried away. Her reaction didn't hurt me. Not really. But it reminded me of something important. If even strangers didn't recognize me as someone belonging to this celebration, maybe I really didn't belong here anymore. I took a slow breath. I told myself that soon I would leave. I would congratulate my son and then quietly go home. I would make tea for myself. I would sit in my little living room and let the quiet settle around me like an old friend. But before I could stand up again, something unexpected happened. My son walked out of the hall. He wasn't alone. His bride was with him, holding his arm. They were smiling, talking to each other. He didn't see me at first. They were discussing something about taking photos near the floral decoration outside. I froze. My heart began to beat faster. Maybe this was the moment. Maybe he would see me and come to me. Maybe he would hold my hand or hug me or even just smile at me. I waited. He turned his head slightly. His eyes landed on me. And in that 1 second, I saw every possibility written in his face. A greeting. A hesitation. A memory. A distance. He looked at me. Then he looked away. He kept walking. He didn't stop. He didn't speak. He didn't invite me. He didn't even nod. He just walked past me as if I was part of the wall. Something inside me broke very quietly, like a thin thread snapping in the dark. I watched the two of them walk toward the door, surrounded by lights, laughter, and cameras. They seemed perfect together. And I felt smaller than I had ever felt in my life. Still, I didn't cry. Not this time. My eyes stayed dry. My heart had grown tired of begging. Maybe this was the moment when love turns into acceptance. Not acceptance of joy, but acceptance of truth. I sat on the bench and folded my hands again. I told myself it was time to let go. After my son walked past me without a word, I stayed very still. It felt as if the air around me had become thicker, heavier. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just sat there, trying to understand how a moment could feel so loud and so silent at the same time. People often think heartbreak comes with noise, with tears, with raised voices. But sometimes it comes quietly, like a soft wind that takes something precious with it. A few minutes passed before I finally took a breath deep enough to feel real. The hall lights were still bright, but they no longer seemed warm. They looked distant, like stars someone had painted far away from me. I could hear the faint music from inside. A love song. A song about promises and forever. I wondered if anyone had ever played a song like that for me. I touched my chest gently, feeling the slow rise and fall of my breath. I told myself to stay calm. I told myself that I was strong enough. I told myself that mothers learn to survive even the quietest kinds of pain. I stood up slowly, holding the side of the bench for support. My legs felt weak but steady. I walked toward the entrance again. This time, I didn't stop to look inside. I didn't wait for someone to call me. I simply walked past the doorway and headed toward the small garden outside the hall. The night air was cooler there. A soft breeze brushed against my face. The sky was dark, but the moon was visible behind a thin layer of clouds. The garden lights were dim, casting gentle shadows on the path. I sat on a stone bench near a small fountain. The sound of water falling softly felt comforting, almost like someone whispering, "You are not alone." As I sat there, memories came back again. But they came gently this time. Not sharp. Not painful. Just quiet reminders of the years that had passed. I remembered the nights I stayed awake waiting for my son to come home from college. I remembered the excitement on his face when he got his first job. I remembered the meal I cooked for him when he told me he wanted to marry. I remembered the day his bride came home for the first time, shy and polite. I remembered trying to give her space, trying not to interfere, trying to be gentle, to be understanding, to be a good mother-in-law. I remembered how hard I tried. And slowly, I remembered when things started to change. Little things. Small moments. A sharp tone here. An ignored good morning there. A door closed slightly faster than usual. A conversation that ended too quickly. Nothing dramatic. Nothing obvious. But enough to make a mother feel that she no longer belonged in the place she once called home. I watched the fountain water ripple in small circles. I let my thoughts settle the same way. Softly. Slowly. One layer at a time. After a little while, I heard soft footsteps behind me. I turned, half expecting it to be my grandson again. But it was the waiter. The same young boy. He stood a few steps away and said gently, "Madam, Would you like some tea? I can bring it here. His kindness felt like a thread tying me back to the world. I nodded and said, "Yes, please. Just a small cup." He smiled and walked away. I stayed on the bench, closing my eyes for a few seconds. I wondered if he knew who I was, or if I was just an old woman sitting in a garden during a celebration she didn't fully belong to. Either way, his kindness mattered. After some minutes, he returned with a cup of tea on a small tray. Steam rose from it, carrying a familiar smell. He placed it gently beside me and said, "Please be careful. It is hot." I thanked him. He nodded and stepped back, but he didn't leave immediately. He stood there quietly, as if he was gathering the courage to ask something. Finally, he said, "Are you the groom's mother?" I looked at him. His voice had no judgment, just curiosity and softness. "Yes," I said quietly. "I am." He lowered his head slightly, as if he felt something. Then he said, "If you need anything, I am here." I smiled. A small smile. A real one. "Thank you," I whispered. He walked away after that. I held the warm cup between my hands. The heat felt good. It grounded me. It reminded me I was still alive, still breathing, still deserving of warmth even if it did not come from the people I expected. As I took a small sip, I heard laughter nearby. My son and his bride were taking photos in the garden now. I could see them from a distance. They looked happy. They looked young. They looked like their lives were just beginning. I watched them quietly. Not with jealousy. Not with anger. Just with a tired kind of love. A mother's love. The kind that gives more than it receives, and still keeps giving. I turned my head away so they wouldn't see me. I didn't want to disturb their joy. I didn't want to be a shadow in their moment. Then I heard a little voice again. "Grandma." I looked up. My grandson was running toward me, his small shoes tapping quickly on the stone path. When he reached me, he hugged my waist tightly. My heart melted all over again. "What are you doing here?" he asked, slightly out of breath. "I am just sitting," I said, brushing his hair back. "Just enjoying the night." He looked at me with the same seriousness that surprised me earlier. "Are you sad?" Children see everything. They see what adults pretend to hide. I leaned forward and kissed his forehead. "No, Beta. I am just thinking." He climbed onto the bench beside me. His small legs couldn't reach the ground. He held my arm and leaned against me. I held him close, feeling the comfort of his presence. After a moment, he whispered, "I want you to sit with me inside." I felt a soft pain in my chest. "I will come later," I said gently. "Right now you go. Your papa must be waiting." He shook his head. "Papa is busy. Mama too. But I am here." His simple words felt like a blessing. I hugged him gently. After a while, his father called him from the distance. My son's voice. I looked up. He was waving at the boy, calling him to come take more pictures. My grandson hopped off the bench. Before running away, he turned and whispered, "I love you, Grandma." And then he was gone again. I watched him leave. I held my breath. Then I let it out slowly. That single sentence filled my empty heart more than anything else had that night. When I finished my tea, I placed the cup back on the tray. The garden felt calmer now. The fountain sounded softer. The night air felt kinder. I knew I would leave soon. But not yet. I wanted to sit a little longer. I wanted to feel every part of this moment. The pain. the acceptance, the love, the truth. I wanted to understand what life was trying to teach me. And maybe, deep inside, I was waiting for something else. A word, a look, a sign, anything. I stayed still and listened to the night. I stayed in the garden longer than I planned. The night felt gentle, almost like it was holding me quietly, giving me space to breathe and think. Sometimes silence becomes the only friend who knows how to sit with your pain without asking questions. I listened to the distant music, to the laughter coming from the hall, to the soft splash of the fountain beside me. All of it blended into a strange kind of calmness that wrapped itself around my heart. After some time, a group of relatives stepped outside to take photos. They stood not too far from me, posing beside the floral decorations. Their clothes shimmered under the lights. They laughed loudly, fixing their hair, adjusting their shawls, calling each other's names to join the pictures. None of them noticed me sitting there. Or maybe they noticed but didn't know what to say. Or maybe they simply didn't recognize me. The groom's mother, sitting alone on a stone bench in the shadows, watching the night instead of the celebration. I looked down at my hands. They were folded neatly in my lap, trembling just a little. I pressed them together until the shaking stopped. Then I lifted my head again and watched the sky. The clouds had moved. The moon was clearer now, glowing softly like a quiet companion. It reminded me of the nights I used to sit on the rooftop with my little boy, pointing out stars to him. He would hold my finger tightly and ask 100 questions. His childhood curiosity used to be endless, and I used to love every moment of it. Those memories felt far away now, but they were still mine. No one could take them. After a while, the relatives went back inside. The garden became empty again. I could still see my son and his bride through the glass doors. They looked perfect. They were talking to a photographer, adjusting their outfits for another picture. I watched them for a moment, then looked away before my heart began to hurt again. I stood up slowly. My legs had grown stiff from sitting too long. I walked along the garden path, taking small, careful steps. The grass smelled fresh. A light breeze rustled the leaves of the small trees planted near the fence. I walked without thinking, just following the path wherever it led. At the far end of the garden, there was a small wooden swing attached to a metal frame. It was empty, moving slightly with the wind. I sat on it gently. The swing creaked softly. I held the chains on both sides and leaned back, letting the night air touch my face. For a moment, I closed my eyes and imagined I was somewhere else. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere peaceful. Maybe a small village. Maybe a lake. Maybe just a room with a warm cup of tea and no responsibilities at all. I imagined a life where I didn't feel forgotten. A life where I didn't sit outside my own son's wedding hall, waiting for a moment that might never come. I opened my eyes again. The swing had slowed down. The lights from the hall looked softer from here, almost blurry. I could hear faint applause from inside. Maybe they were cutting the cake. Maybe they were feeding each other the first bite. Maybe someone was giving a speech. None of it was meant for me. As I sat there, I heard footsteps behind me. Slow. Heavy. I turned my head. It was an older man, perhaps in his 60s. He wore a dark suit and glasses. His face looked kind, gentle. He approached the swing and smiled politely. "May I sit?" he asked, pointing to the garden bench nearby. I nodded. Yes, of course. He sat down, placing his walking stick beside him. For a few moments, we sat in silence. Then he said softly, "These functions get tiring, don't they?" I smiled faintly. Yes. They do. He glanced toward the hall. My niece is the bride, he said. Everyone is very excited. The whole family is running around. He paused before adding, but I prefer quiet places like this. Too much noise inside. I nodded again. We shared a small silence that didn't feel uncomfortable. After a moment, he looked at me with curious, kind eyes. And you? Whose side are you from? His question was gentle. Not intrusive. Not unkind. I looked down at my hands for a moment before answering. My son is the groom, I said quietly. His eyebrows lifted in surprise. Oh. I didn't see you inside. I was outside, I said simply. He looked at me for a long moment, and I could tell he understood more than he said. Sometimes strangers can hear what family cannot. He nodded slowly, respectfully, as if he was acknowledging something inside me without asking me to explain it. After a while, he stood up. It was nice talking to you, he said warmly. You too, I replied. He picked up his walking stick and walked slowly toward the hall. Before entering, he turned slightly and gave me a small nod. A gesture of kindness. I held that small moment gently in my heart. I stayed on the swing for a few more minutes. Then I stood up again and walked back toward the corridor. The music had changed again. Softer now. Maybe the event was reaching its end. Inside the hall, people were forming a line to give their final congratulations to the couple. I could see my son standing on the stage again. My grandson was beside him now, holding his hand, looking sleepy. His small head rested against his father's arm, and I felt a tenderness rise in my chest. I walked closer, but I stayed outside the door. I waited until the line became shorter. I wanted to choose a moment when I wouldn't disturb anyone. When I wouldn't be noticed too much. When I could slip in and slip out quietly. When the hall grew calmer, I took a slow breath and stepped inside for the first time since the ceremony began. The lights were warm. The carpet was soft under my feet. The scent of flowers filled the air. People were chatting softly now, tired from hours of celebration. I walked toward the stage slowly. Every step felt heavy. Every breath felt careful. My heart beat quietly but painfully in my chest. When I reached the stage, my son was talking to someone. He hadn't noticed me yet. His bride was fixing her dupatta. My grandson was rubbing his sleepy eyes. I stood there for a few seconds, waiting. Finally, my son turned his head and saw me. His expression didn't change much. Just a small, polite look. As if he was greeting someone he barely knew. I whispered, "Mubarak ho." He nodded. "Thank you." Just that. 2 small words. No warmth. No invitation. No happiness. His bride looked at me briefly and gave a practiced smile. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. I nodded. I wanted to say something else. Something motherly. Something meaningful. But my voice felt locked inside my chest. I didn't want to cry in front of them. I didn't want to embarrass anyone. So I simply said, "Allah bless you both." My grandson looked up and smiled sleepily. He reached out his arms. I picked him up and hugged him tightly, feeling his warmth against my shoulder. That moment felt like the only real thing I had left tonight. I put him down gently. "Be good," I whispered. He nodded, rubbing his eyes. I stepped back. My son turned away, already speaking to the next person in line. I stood there for a second, then turned around and walked out of the hall. This time, I didn't wait. I didn't sit. I didn't look back. I walked straight toward the exit door, feeling the night air brush against my skin like a quiet goodbye. I knew the night wasn't over yet. Something bigger was still waiting. A truth I hadn't seen. A moment I didn't expect. I walked toward the parking area slowly, not knowing that the hardest part of the night was still ahead of me. I walked through the parking area slowly, my shoes clicking softly on the tiles. The night air was cool, carrying a faint smell of flowers from the garden. I could hear distant laughter and music still floating from the hall, but it felt far away, like someone else's life. I told myself to keep walking, to move forward, to leave behind the pain that had sat with me all night. My grandson ran ahead for a moment, then stopped and turned back. His small hand reached for mine, and I let him guide me a little. His presence was comforting. It reminded me that even in the hardest moments, someone still loved me without condition. When we reached the car, my son came out of the hall again, this time alone. I could see the faint tiredness in his face. He had smiled and congratulated people countless times, and now it was quiet for a few minutes. Our eyes met briefly. There was something unsaid, hanging between us. A tension, a distance, a silence that had lasted for years. I wanted to speak. I wanted to tell him everything I felt, everything I had carried in my heart since the day I had left. But the words caught in my throat. I was afraid. Afraid of his reaction. Afraid of disappointment. Afraid of making the moment awkward. He took a deep breath, as if he too was holding something inside. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The cars around us shone under the dim lights, but our world had become quiet and small, just the two of us standing there. Finally he whispered, "Amy." His voice was soft, full of hesitation. I felt a tremor in my chest. The years of hurt and misunderstanding began to rise, but I held them in. I nodded slowly, encouraging him to continue. I am sorry," he said. His eyes didn't leave mine. "For everything. For not telling you. For not being strong enough. For letting time pass without saying what I should have said years ago." I felt my throat tighten, but I managed to smile gently. "I know, Beta," I whispered. "I know now. And it's okay." He looked at me, eyes wide and slightly wet. "But you were never okay being away. You shouldn't have left alone." I shook my head softly. "I had to. I thought it would be easier. I thought you would be happier without me interfering. I was wrong. But I survived, and I learned. And I am glad you are happy now." He took a step closer, his voice trembling. "I love you, Amy." I never stopped. I felt tears finally stream down my cheeks. Not the quiet, small tears of earlier, but the ones that come from deep inside. I reached out and held his hands in mine. They were larger now, stronger, but still my son's hands, the hands I had held when he was a child. "I love you too," I whispered. "Always." For a few moments, we just stood there. No words. No distractions. Just two hearts reconnecting after years of silence. Then my grandson ran back to us, sleepy but smiling. "Papa, Grandma is here," he said brightly. He hugged both of us together, his small arms wrapped around our legs. I laughed softly, a sound that felt light and free for the first time tonight. My son's eyes glistened as he looked at us both. For a moment, I saw the family we used to be. Not perfect, not complete, but real. Whole in a way that didn't require everything to be perfect. We stood there quietly, holding each other. The wedding lights glowed around us. The music from the hall felt distant now. Not important. Nothing was important except this moment. Finally, my son whispered, Come inside. Let's take a few photos. Just us. I nodded. My heart felt lighter. The pain hadn't disappeared completely, but it had softened. The years of misunderstanding, of distance, of quiet suffering, had begun to heal in this small, tender moment. We walked back toward the hall together. My grandson ran ahead, laughing softly. My son's hand brushed against mine. I felt his warmth, his love, and the reassurance that some bonds can never truly break. Inside, we took photos quietly, just the three of us. No one else crowded around. Just a mother, a son, and a grandson. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged. Like my love mattered. Like my presence was welcome. After the photos, my son leaned closer and whispered, "Thank you for coming, Amy. Really. I needed you here." I smiled gently. And I needed to be here too. We didn't say anything more. Words weren't necessary anymore. Our hearts had spoken quietly, honestly, and completely. That night, I returned home with my grandson. My heart was full, not with the noise of the celebration, but with the quiet peace of understanding, forgiveness, and love. I knew there would be more challenges ahead, more moments of hurt, and more misunderstandings in the future. But for now, I also knew that love, even when quiet and hidden, could still find its way back. I placed the paper heart my grandson had made on my bedside table. I touched it softly. It was small and imperfect, but it represented everything that mattered. Love that survived distance, silence, and years of waiting. I sat for a long time that night, thinking about life, about my son, about my family. I realized that forgiveness is not always about saying the words. Sometimes it is about opening your heart and letting go of pain, letting love flow again, even quietly. And I whispered a prayer for my son, my family, and myself, that we would continue to love each other honestly, without fear, without silence, and that the years we lost would never be wasted because they had taught us how much love could endure. That night, I slept with my grandson beside me, feeling warmth and hope in my heart. I knew life would continue. There would be challenges. But there was also love, strong enough to heal even the quietest wounds. And that is the lesson I carried with me from that night. That love, patience, and understanding are never wasted. They are the quiet threads that hold families together, even when life seems too loud, too fast, or too painful to bear.